Nature reminds us once each year that life is only for a time, and that death is its inevitable conclusion. But as we know that the leaves will return to the tree, we sometimes, somehow feel that something persists past the death of the physical body. If the thing that persists moves on to a different place in space and time, then we think of this as soul. But if it lingers in our space and in our time, then we think of this as ghost. The following program is about ghosts, but not just any ghosts. It is about the ghosts here in Winnipeg, and it is about some of the people who have experienced these ghosts, and it is about the work of two Winnipeggers, Steve Hladkyj and Roy Bauer, two paranormal investigators who are attempting to study them. The most widely known ghost stories in Manitoba revolve around the site of St. Andrew's Church, which is located a short distance south of Lockport on the west side of the Red River. For years, stories have persisted about strange and unexplainable events that have happened here. The most common story surrounding St. Andrew's Church is the one that claims that if a person runs around the church 3 times while a clock is striking midnight, then looks in the church window, they will see their fate and destiny, or sometimes a ghost, clad in iridescent white. A variation of this story claims that following the same procedure, the unfortunate runner will simply vanish from the face of the earth, snatched away by the denizens of the other world. Other stories include the one made on more than one occasion, which claims people reporting the walls of the church to shake violently when attempts to climb them were made. Other reports tell of moving lights that would chase away the would-be intruders. To most of us, living in this age of scientific rationalism, stories such as these must seem quite unbelievable. But to the people who claim to have actually experienced them, there is no question of belief. Located on Henderson Highway, near Redwood Avenue, is Hamilton House. Although not in itself haunted, Hamilton House came to be highly regarded in the earlier part of this century as an important center for research into the paranormal, due to the work initiated by Dr. Thomas Glendenning Hamilton, for whom the house is named in memory. Towards the end of his career in the 1920s and 30s, Dr. Hamilton, an accomplished physician and local political figure, became interested in the study of spiritualistic mediums. His interest led him to found the Winnipeg Psychical Research Society, which, operating out of Hamilton House, embarked upon research which to this day is still regarded as some of the most profound work done in the exploration of the paranormal. Within the walls of this house, research sessions were conducted with psychic mediums who were able to produce a substance called teleplasm or ectoplasm. Flowing out of their bodies, this substance would form itself into shapes containing images of people who had long since died. Today, Hamilton House is the location of the Olive Branch Gift Shop, a non-profit charity organization which markets craft works by artists in developing nations. The stories of Hamilton House and St. Andrew's Church, although perhaps the two most widely known in Winnipeg, by no means account for all of the paranormal activity in this city. A number of years ago, in a house in this older residential neighborhood of Winnipeg, Jeanette Sansregray experienced a series of events that completely altered her conception of reality.
It started, really, with the footsteps on the cellar stairs. And at first, like I say, I thought, well, it's an old house. It creaks, you know, that sort of thing. And then I thought, well, maybe one of the kids is getting up out of bed and, you know, running around upstairs. So I'd go upstairs and check, and the children were asleep. And then it became very evident that the footsteps were on the basement stairs, which were just not an enclosed staircase, just, you know, boards. And the footsteps were heavy, and you could count them up and down the stairs. And then the doorknob would turn. And this was almost a nightly occurrence. So it got to be very unnerving. And also trying to go down into the basement to do the laundry was very unnerving, because I always felt as if someone was standing behind me. And the hair on the back of my neck would, you'd get that awful feeling, and you'd quickly turn around and there was no one there. But then you would feel very cold. And I would leave whatever it was and just run up the stairs and lock the door again. And that never got better. It was always like that. And then with the cupboard doors, they say at first, well, I thought I've put things in hastily and, I haven't really piled them correctly or whatever. And so they fell out. But then I would take everything out of the cupboard and put it in very precisely in a very neat arrangement. That didn't do any good. It may stay that way for 3 or 4 days or a week or 2. But then one day, with no rhyme or reason, the cupboard doors would fly open and these things would fall out onto the counter. And it would sometimes continue on a daily basis. Sometimes it would skip 2 or 3 or weeks or a month or 6 weeks and it would start again. And I did get to the point where I thought, heck, I might as well talk to this thing, whatever it is. And I would say, look it, would you please stop? You're making me absolutely crazy. You've had your fun, now quit. And it would. It would stop for a while, and there again, no rhyme or reason, maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, and it would start again. And that I could give no explanation for either. At first, like I said, I thought, well, it's poor arrangement. But how can it keep happening over and over? And then with the windows in the porch off my son's room, he would call out, Mom, the windows are blowing. And I'd say, Napoleon, they can't be blowing. There's no wind. They're hooked. No, they're not. And I'd go upstairs, and these windows would be open, and they would be blowing, and there was no wind. And the hooks were off, and finally, we nailed them shut. We took spikes, my husband and I, and nailed them along the bottom of the window frame. Didn't help. The nails were out, and the windows were open. And then with the children's rocker, the night that it started rocking by itself. And of course, wicker creaks to start with, and this thing rocked, and it creaked. And the cupboard doors on this little, it was like a little colonial cupboard, and the cupboard doors open, and the plates that were in the bottom came out. And if I remember correctly, there was 4 of each, 4 plates, 4 saucers, 4 cups. And the plates came out one at a time and were neatly placed on the floor in a row. The saucers came out and they were placed on the floor in a row. And then the cups came out and were placed on top of the saucers. And that just did me in. I just stared in disbelief, and I cried. I must have cried for hours and was just absolutely dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do. And I did take the rockers off that darn rocking chair so that it couldn't rock anymore. But that was one of the worst, really worst things, because it was so visual, like you were sitting there looking at it. And there was nothing you could do about it. And afraid to say anything to anyone for fear that they would say, well, you weren't in your right mind. And I wasn't one who believed prior to this in, ghosts or anything of that nature. I read a lot, but I really had not given any thought to it ever in my life until this house and these happenings. And it wasn't until we had moved out of the house that 2 old residents had told us that the man who had divided the house in this crazy manner that it was divided into had hung himself in the coal room in the basement, and it had hung there for somewhere in the vicinity of 3 weeks to a month, he was, I don't know whether he had no family, no one came looking for him, and so he wasn't found for this long period of time. And like I say, and there were 13 stairs to the basement. And it was just very creepy and very weird, and it was haunted. I mean, that I have no doubt about whatsoever.
Jeanette lived through these experiences without outside help, but for many this is not possible, and some will turn for assistance to Chris Rutkowski and Roy Bauer, two paranormal investigators who have spent years in the serious study of the paranormal in and around Winnipeg.
The not-so-famous hauntings of Winnipeg, of course, are the ones where the individuals involved have come to us in confidence and have asked for our help, but have not been willing to let themselves be known or the house be known. There was, for example, an incident in last winter where a house in a very new part of town, it's very new homes, was experienced by a different kind of haunting. On a very new street in a very new home, a woman claimed that she had seen the figure of an Indian in full native costume on more than one occasion, as it turns out. And this occurred while she was walking around in her house and gazing out across a field. Now, we did some checking, and as far as we can tell, the records are incomplete as to be conclusive, but we suspect that the area was a native burial ground quite a long time ago, and that it's certainly possible that some of the entities or the spirits or whatever might still be haunting if you were to be so inclined as to be in that genre. This was very unusual. We had actually taken a psychic or a sensitive clairvoyant into the home just to see what would happen, trying to be as objective as possible, while still allowing the fact that many people might be a little more tuned into this type of thing than the rigid scientific instructions that we're used to. And the psychic walked through the house independently of anybody else, and we made notes of areas where she had got impressions or felt cold or whatnot. And quite surprisingly on our part, this clairvoyant was able to identify that it was some man, and most likely an Indian of some sort, and about the area where this woman who had originally contacted us had had her own experience. Being a psychical researcher or just a person interested in unusual experiences like the paranormal is not as glamorous as made out in the movie Ghostbusters, for example. The differences are that a lot of it is very, very tedious work, a lot of work involving letter writing, digging through archives, digging through old books and journals and libraries, talking to people in general about some of the stories, trying to convince people to talk to you about some of their stories. There still is a very great stigma about speaking to other people about some of the experiences you've had.
Once the fear of making contact with a psychical researcher has been overcome, though, the process of investigation can begin, usually with a phone call.
And did you see any lights with that? What were you feeling? Did he see it too?
Chris will then phone Roy and give him the information.
Hello, Roy? Yeah, this is Chris. I've just had a call from a woman in the north end of town. I phoned back the person, discuss with them what has been going on, taking notes and deciding if an investigation should be taken. If something happened 10 or 15 years ago, usually there's really not much you can do, and you just take down the information that is given, and we file it away for future reference. If it's something occurring at the present, we make an appointment with the people to go down there, speak with them in more detail, take a look at the surroundings, depending on what is happening in the home, and if it is recurring on a continuous basis and it happens repeatedly, our main objective is to try to obtain some form of evidence, either on tape or on photographic film.
Solid. And this door is found open sometimes.
During the time that this program was being produced, Chris and Roy were in the process of investigating a home in Fort Rouge that was reported to be experiencing poltergeist activity.
See, now it's shut. If it's shut like that, there's no problem, but if someone was to leave it slightly ajar, it has just enough air pressure with hardly anything at all.
Following the initial investigations of this particular house, Chris and Roy decided that the assistance of a clairvoyant might be of use in revealing information about the house that neither of them could obtain on their own by ordinary means. The clairvoyant was brought into the home one evening and allowed to move from room to room, sensing the building's past.
No. Well, it's from the past, I'm sure of that. Perhaps a child that wasn't very happy for some reason, and it's manifesting in movement or shakings in that area. Felt like shaking.
Actual physical movements?
Yeah, physical movement. Maybe locked in that little room at the top of the stairs there. For some reason.
In this instance, the clairvoyant received impressions of a young child, of crying, and of energetic movement, of a possible child abuse case from 40 years ago that may have led to death. From this point, it will be up to Chris and Roy to research the available records to see if, in fact, the clairvoyant's impressions can be corroborated. The investigation is continuing at this time. But what of the residents who must remain in this house?
In the case of poltergeist phenomena where objects seem to move around on their own, this is mainly associated with stress of one person in the house or a combination of many people in the house. So basically, by getting rid of the stress, or at least getting it under control, there's a good chance that the poltergeist phenomena will cease. Most of the instances where we have been called out to speak with individuals to a home have either been resolved or the person has been suitably impressed or satisfied with even the act of our coming over to discuss with them has left them a little more at ease. Now, in the movies, there are things like calling in an exorcist or various other types of radical actions that might be considered. I don't believe that that occurs very often in real life at all.
Most recently, Roy Bauer has been experimenting with EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, as an investigative tool. Using an ordinary tape recorder, it is possible to record voices onto the tape that shouldn't have been there at all. According to Bauer, it is something that anyone can do.
basically anybody should be able to do this. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a very good ear. The voices that are recorded are usually quite faint. They're in a certain peculiar rhythm, and they're usually 2 or 3 times quicker than the normal speed. The easiest method, there's quite a few methods, but the easiest would be just using an ordinary mic and placing the tape record level at full level, and just playing, just recording. And on playback, it's suggested that for every 1 minute of recording, you should play back that section of the tape approximately 10 times in order to pick up if any voices have been recorded. Another method is using the static from TV or radio, where there are no broadcasts, and you directly connect the static using cables into the mic input of the recorder and just record the static. What seems to happen is that the static is somehow manipulated to form words.
If fooling around with tape recorders is not your cup of tea, the more traditional symptoms to look and listen for are, for example, footsteps on stairways and in hallways, doors which open by themselves, distinct chills in rooms where there are no drafts, lights which turn on and off by themselves, and objects which move around.
If their house is haunted, or they suspect their house is haunted, you have to immediately try to rule out everything. Is it your house expanding and contracting? Is it the neighbors next door? Do you have an extermination problem, an infestation problem? Are there any other explanations other than your house is haunted? Only then can you say that there's something very strange going on here, and it's time to call in somebody from the Manitoba Mysteries Group.
In all of this, is there any reason to fear?
No, I wouldn't suspect that there is any reason to be afraid. Number one, if all the paranormal events and psychic events that people normally associate with ghosts and poltergeist activity and whatnot and hauntings, if all these phenomena really don't exist and they're in people's imagination, there's certainly no reason to panic. If there is some degree of reality to any of these phenomena, there still is not necessarily any reason to panic, because the intrusion on your life is very, very limited. Knocks on doors and things falling off shelves and whatnot, footsteps. These are all very, very low-key types of things. I wouldn't see any need to really get worried about this type of thing under either condition.
Whether you believe in ghosts or not, we hope that you have been entertained and informed by this program. For further information, you can call the Manitoba Mysteries Group at 489-9190. A final question. While you have been watching this program, is it just possible that someone or something has been watching you? Good night.